Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I realise day two at 4 o'clock is not an ideal slot, but thank you for your patience and thank you for joining us. Really appreciated. My name is Peter Dare. As my colleague said, I'm a senior exec advisor at PwC in the Middle East. I'm relatively new to the Middle East. I've been here just over a year, but I have a 25-year career in sports so far. I was managing partner, before PwC, managing partner at a sports marketing agency, working with brands and rights holders globally to help build their business mainly through a commercial lens. I was also, for several years, the global head of sponsorship at the English FA, working at Wembley Stadium and building a commercial program there. And prior to that, I was at Sky Sports. So I have a long and varied career in sport. My football team that I support is Fulham FC. I don't know if any of you follow football, but that's my team. But let's, without further ado, get on to the main topic and introduce my learned colleagues here today. We're here to talk about the subject of how immersive sports and culture drive tourism growth. Just to let you know, we have recently released at PwC a thought leadership paper in the last week. If you haven't read this yet, please go to pwc.com and have a look. And that is the basis of this session. We're going to draw on some of the learnings from that. And my colleagues that I've invited here will give their expertise in this matter and answer any questions that anyone have. So first of all, I will introduce Mushtaq Awali, my learned colleague. Mushtaq is a senior exec advisor at PwC, a member of the senior leadership team within the destinations sector, and focusing on sport and leisure across the whole Middle East. Prior to this, Mushtaq was one of the key executives of Qatar's successful bid for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. He's also held senior roles at the within the Qatar sports ecosystem, at the Stars League and at the QFA Football Association and the Aspire Zone as well. A passionate advocate of sports, this is the bad bit, Mushtaq is a love of football and is an avid Manchester United supporter, but we'll forgive him that. Please welcome Mushtaq. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Sophie Ryan. Sophie is the head of corporate comms, marketing and brand here in Dubai at the Dubai Racing Club, the organisation behind the Dubai Racing Carnival and the world-renowned Dubai World Cup at the Meydan Racecourse. With a career spanning some of the UAE's most high-profile events and brands, including COP28, Expo 2020, the Jumeirah Group and Godolphin, Sophie brings a real depth of experience in strategic comms, storytelling and brand positioning. A lifelong equestrian enthusiast and daughter of a Derby-winning ex-jockey, I did not know that. She combines her passion for horse racing and a keen interest in sport, well-being, and teaches Pilates in her spare time. Welcome, Sophie. And then finally, last but not least, is Sam Dawson. Sam is the Managing Director of GSIQ, an award-winning research and insights agency, powering audience understanding and commercial growth across sport, sponsorship, and crucially, tourism. He spent the first half of his career in the UK before moving to Dubai in 2017, where he's held senior roles at Nielsen Sports, and YouGov. A Bath Rugby and Arsenal fan, never mind, enjoying a rare spell of success, it won't last. He admits that as a Bath native, his first love is rugby, but the recent England women's Euro success has seen us inspire his two young daughters to take up the beautiful game. Welcome, Sam. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a seat. So, as I said, we're here today to talk about the intersection of sport and tourism. Hopefully, many of you have seen or read the thought leadership piece that I mentioned, but if not, please do go and check it out. Now, like much of the world, the Gulf region is moving from a commodity wealth to experience wealth, where prosperity is defined by engagement, participation, and creativity. These are the key traits of sport and leisure. Sports tourists are defined as those people who visit a destination either to watch a sports event, participate in a sports event, or visit an iconic location. It accounts to around 10% of global tourism spend, but is growing at a credible rate of 17% per year. The total market was $600 billion in 2022 and is predicted to rise to around $2 trillion in 2030. The Middle East is currently tracking at around 6% of that global market. Now, these are big numbers, but how do we, as a region here, capitalize on that upsurge, and in particular, delivering world-leading immersive sport and cultural experiences? Sam, if I can turn to you first, Sam. The title is Immersive Sport Experience. So how would you define immersive experiences in sport and culture, and why do you think they're important for tourism today?
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, everyone, for having me here to speak on a very important sort of topic that I'm particularly passionate about. I'll forgive you for that walk-on. I never thought I'd be introduced by a Fulham fan, so that was a low point already. I think in terms of, immersive experiences, when I think of an immersive experience, I think of something which really kind of brings out the passion. It's someone feeling like they're actually part of the experience. It's moving from, a spectator to a participant, bringing an event goer or a traveler into the storytelling of the event and the destination. That's kind of all, theoretical when it comes to actually trying to, apply a one-size-fits-all definition to what is an experiential event. It can differ massively. I mean, for one person, it could be sitting in the crowd at a sports event, feeling the roar of everyone around them, the kind of combined belonging to a fan base. For another person, it could be going to a local community event where there's an exchange of cultural ideas. So it can really, really vary. I think the key thing from a destination perspective is obviously trying to think about the group that you're looking to attract and how they define immersion. And I think why is this important for tourism and destinations, as Pete said? If we take sports as an example, taking up 10% of the global industry, some of the studies that we've run at GSIQ have shown that amongst those sports travelers, the destination itself is very important. So 1 in 3 sports tourists say that the destination is an important factor when they're thinking about attending a sports event. And over 40% of people say that they're open to extending the trip to turn it into a wider vacation. So again, all from the angle of how destinations can be thinking about creating immersive events. It's really thinking about not just the experience that the event goer is going to have, but how you can turn them into repeat visitors and actually essentially advocates going forward who are going to go back from that event, return, and also recommend your destination to friends and family.
Thanks, Sam. If I can just build on that point, thinking of the major events, which is the region has attracted quite a number of recently, how do you think they've impacted tourism flows and the perceptions of the region that have changed over recent history?
Yeah, I think from a kind of mega events and major events perspective, and I'm sure Mushtaq will talk a little bit more on this, what major events do is they create that spark, they create that visibility, they essentially can access maybe an addressable audience of people that wouldn't necessarily have been considering that destination in the first place. So it gives that sort of that window of opportunity. I always think, I'm sure everyone in the room who lives in the Middle East can kind of relate to this. I always feel like I'm a bit of an advocate. I'm always trying to promote the region and Dubai as a city. And lots of people come in with a set perception. And I don't think that there's ever been a time where someone who has come here, maybe they're just humoring me, but has left with a more negative impression. They always leave with a more positive impression. So what mega events do, as I say, it creates that spark. It gives people a reason to travel. And then once they're there, it's all about, seizing that opportunity. And some of the data that we have shows that it's working. Sports travelers globally are 2 times more likely to consider the UAE as a holiday destination. And you see that then in terms of actually, when events are happening, spikes in occupancy, spikes in hotel rates. You've only got to look at the F1 as an example down in Abu Dhabi, 130,000 people, 34% increased international spending, higher hotel rates. So all of these elements kind of come into play. And then actually also the final thing that I'll just say is from a mega event perspective, so really thinking about the biggest events like Qatar 22, it can have a ripple effect that goes beyond not only the venue, but also the city, but also into the region. So we did a study at the time which showed that 60% of UAE and KSA residents were expecting to spend more during the FIFA World Cup. Even though they weren't attending, it just creates this sort of festival, holiday atmosphere of people going out and putting that back into the economy.
Definitely, I think we've all experienced that in the region, certainly in the last few years. Mushtaq, if I may turn to you next, building on what Sam was saying, and I think some of the numbers back this up, sport and culture becoming genuine economic priorities within the region. Why do you think this is happening now, and what's really driving it?
Yeah, thank you, Pete, first for your introduction and for your showing sympathy with Man United fanship. The good thing is that we are now on the trajectory of winning, so that's come timely. Why sports and culture? If you rightly mentioned in the introduction you've made about the industry itself and the economy of the region, the economy is now going through a stage of shifting from, you rightly said, commodity wealth into an experience wealth. And that means that we are in a region that is no longer defining itself as being an importer of creativity, as rather becoming to a destination where it goes to be an exporter of creativity. And that means that we have to invest in creative industries. Sports and cultures are pillar to these industries, and they encompass digital, they encompass different niche talents that need to work on, and high value creation of contribution to the economy. If you look to this and from a macro level as well, the tourism is being defined by all the GCC country national development strategies as being a growth cluster. And that growth cluster is being underpinned by sports and culture as a fuel for that growth cluster. So the region is moving from only being a showcasing that is capable to host event and being visible on the global landscape to become more of a sustainable business model for it to fuel their economy. And I think that's why sports and culture are very important, and they intersect very nicely within the tourism as a cluster growth for our region and the countries of region, namely countries of like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE.
Most definitely. Thank you, Mushtaq. If I may, I'd like to, because of your specific experience in Qatar and the World Cup, and obviously it being the region's most high-profile event within recent times, just like to ask you a little bit more about that. So it was a landmark moment for the region, as we've just said. There was a 17%, you may not be aware of this, 17% uplift in ticket sales versus 2018. So it's small little Qatar versus giant, European monolith of Russia. More tickets were sold in Qatar for the World Cup. Not many predicted that, certainly outside of the region. So my question to you there, Mushtaq, is what were the key lessons learned in creating experiences that went beyond just the matches and actually delivered something culturally interesting that gave people a reason to stick around and come back?
Yeah, and I think there is a driver for that increase, I think, for the ticket sales and in terms of the overall attendance. And one of these, the key drivers was the compact nature of the tournament. This was a tournament that is one of its kind, and it will not, I don't think it will happen again, where the entire tournament of 32 teams happened on literally on one city. So people, for the first time, they were able to see 2 to 3 matches in one day. So that was very key in order to make the decision of coming to Qatar World Cup as opposed to 2018 version that you've mentioned because of the geography, the massive geography in the 2018 version. So that's one thing. The other thing from a regional perspective, Qatar World Cup was a regional moment, was a wake up for the Arab region in the sense that this is the first time an Arab country and Middle Eastern country is hosting a major sporting event at the scale of a World Cup. And precedented that time, 2022, there was a 12 years of fueled by controversy sometimes, by narratives that speaks about that World Cup. So that makes the World Cup a very, the Qatar World Cup was a very on-demand product by the people who lives in the region, because they want to experience the first World Cup in their region, and also by global spectators who have followed these narratives and these stories for a long time, and they want to now come and see for themselves what does that mean and what does success look compared to the promises that were made by Qatar at the start of the bidding process and later in the planning process. So I think, and back to this, so and in the planning there was a lot of focus on integrating cultural elements within the hosting process. If you look to what happens in the Qatar World Cup, you will see that the majority of the fans, they were gravitated naturally to a central point in the old souk Waqif in the city, just because what culturally represent to the hosting country, to the hosting city, because it's the oldest landmark. People, they wanted to explore that, and then they don't come only for the typical events of that, whether it's concerts or live events or parties, but they want to really experience the culture of the event that they're visiting, the destination they are visiting, and that was very much built in, integrated into the hosting and the event hosting planning.
Thank you, Mushtaq. And having been at the FA bidding for the England to host the World Cup, and in shock when Qatar won, and when the event was delivered, which is probably the best World Cup ever, it's changed a huge amounts of people's perception about the country and the region. That is without doubt. Sophie, thank you for your patience. I'd like to ask you another cultural event. Obviously, what the Dubai Racing Club is the most famous for is the Dubai World Cup. It's one of the most richest horse races in the world, and a genuine regional cultural spectacle. How do you, as the marketing director, design strategies that go beyond the race itself to create immersive experience for local and international visitors alike?
Thank you. Gosh, it's an amazing question, and it's so layered in terms of how we manage our approach. Horse racing is an incredible global sport, but it's also quite niche, and compared to the likes of football or tennis, it's not loved on that scale. So we have a huge job to do to continuously attract new people into the sport itself, and then also from an event perspective, create that experience as to why people would want to attend that event specifically. The Dubai World Cup as a race day has a total prize money of $30.5 million, and the Dubai World Cup race itself is worth $12 million, and it's won within 2 minutes. So it's life-changing for someone, those people, and the emotion that goes into that, it really is quite remarkable. But going back from that, those are obviously headliners that grab people's attention, throughout our approach of promoting and advertising the event itself. But at the end of the day, it was the vision and the passion of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed who conceptualized the event himself, wanting to put both Dubai on the global horse racing map and also creating his own horse racing team in Godolphin, and that's where it all stems from. So for us, whenever we're challenged with the direction that we're trying to take that year, or ways to innovate and make it better from the year before or the year before that, that's what we always go back to as our North Star. We really see that the Dubai World Cup has grown with that of the city itself. So it's really looking towards Dubai as inspiration for the innovation, the excellence, and the hospitality that we need to be bringing to the Dubai World Cup itself to make sure that people are engaged and interested in attending. I think you were seeing a lot. I actually don't really look to other horse racing events around the world for much inspiration. I think the one that we kind of maybe benchmark ourselves against is the Kentucky Derby, which it's in Kentucky in the US, and it's the second most watched sporting event in the US after the Super Bowl. So they are doing really amazing things, and their results also speak for themselves. But as a sport in general, it's needing a lot of innovation going into it. And I think the Dubai World Cup specifically, we do a lot of work around the destination piece. So how are we working to create an experience on ground that really immerses our guests into the world of horse racing, but also what are we doing from an entertainment and a hospitality perspective as well, and partnering with some major food and beverage providers and some really big restaurant names this year specifically, which we'll be announcing in a couple of weeks' time, to really, really bolster what that experience looks like. In 2026, the Dubai World Cup will be celebrating its 30th anniversary as well, so a huge milestone. Last year, attendance was up by 18%. We had record-breaking crowds of 65,000. For the second year in a row, we broke three Guinness World Records for the closing ceremony light show, and had a record-breaking broadcast to over 170 countries. So it's growing in a way that's showing really strong momentum. But like I said, I think if you have Dubai as your North Star and seeing what the city is doing, then you can never sleep. Yeah. You can never rest on that.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. I didn't know some of those numbers. And so bringing it back to tourism, how do you measure the impact of the World Cup on tourism, and what trends are you seeing in engagement, visitor engagement year on year?
So we work very closely with the Dubai Economy and Tourism Department, and we track things like, and Sam was saying, visitation, hotel guests, duration of stay over that period of time. If you were to ask my boss, he's very interested in the speed at which I can sell tickets compared to the previous year. He just wants to sell out in record time. But I think for us, it's also about the level of connection that we can create for our guests. The numbers are obviously there. We work with YouGov as well on the brand perception reports that they pull together for us. And of course, that they are incredibly important, not only to us, but to our sponsors as well. We have some amazing pillar partner brands that are part of the experience. But I think creating those memories and those storytelling moments are where my focus tends to lie, and the event experience itself and bringing that in. So I don't have like a huge marketing budgets to work with. So we also rely very, very heavily on the ambassadors and the stakeholders that we bring in to help share the story and the message with us. And on top of that, it's also a sport that's horses who can't speak. So for the Dubai World Cup itself, those horses, we don't actually know the horses that will race until 2.5 weeks prior, and they don't arrive with their horse connections until 6 to 10 days out from the event itself. So there's a whole storytelling arc and narrative that also has to be incredibly reactive based on the results that we're seeing, how the horse performs, what the jockey's saying, whether the horse traveled well from the US or Japan, wherever they're coming in from. So I think as much as it's about the numbers that we're seeing and the visitation that's increasing year on year, which is all incredibly positive, it is also about making sure we're driving new audiences and attendance in, and that they're taking away lasting memories that makes them want to come back or show new interest into the sport as well.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Sophie. So, Mushtaq, just building on that, Sophie mentioned what the world that they've created around ultimately a 2-minute race, isn't it? The key moment. How do we spin that out even further? Do you think? So how can culture, sport, and business events combine to build a year-round rhythm that isn't just focused on a big energy moment, that we can make it last a year?
Yeah, I think that starts and stems from a national level, from the country level itself that is interested in that agenda, has that they have to create that stability and momentum within their own calendars. So if you look at Qatar and what they're doing now, or KSA, they're all building their own national calendars that fills into a number of events, and they are of a different scale and a different interest as well. So they are different between sports, culture, entertainment, and so. But then what that eventually do is that create a stability in the calendar that integrate the three pieces together: sports, culture, and entertainment, and becomes part of one offering to the visitor. But also, what creates an economy of that visitor. So each one of them will spill into a different values that will come into the economy and create that for the longer term. once you have that stability, and then you need to build on it. But that's on a national level. If you want to elevate that in the region, you have to move from that national success in stabilizing the calendars and doing the alignment and the integration across these pillars into working on a GCC level. And that's where I think the next move will happen in this region, in my view. I think it's going to move from purely coordination into more of an integration and unified offering for a more of a good, call it GCC visitor experience.
Okay. Thank you. And Sophie, bringing it back to your event beyond that 2 minutes, because you've got a big stadium at Meydan Racecourse, and you've got 365 days to do stuff to attract visitors. What are you doing outside of that marquee event to make sure that the facility and the talent you have there are working hard and driving revenue?
So we have the Dubai Racing Carnival as well, which is our whole season of horse racing that runs from November through till March. It was expanded recently to be that entire season. Previously, there was a local season, then a Dubai World Cup Carnival, and then the Dubai World Cup. So they've changed it, they've changed the structure, and now we're seeing a lot more international visitors and competitors flying in to be there from the start. Also looking at the way that the stronger races are spread out across that season as well, so that we're really encouraging people to come over, benefit from our facilities being based in Dubai. Obviously, the geographical positioning really plays to our advantage. We attract a lot of inbound horses and horse connections from Hong Kong, from Japan, from the US, from Europe, which is incredible, and it really, is testament to the work that the team has done to reestablish what that carnival looks like. But also, horses, as much as humans do, thrive under the sun. They love the vitamin D, and a lot of them come over here just for a holiday and to recuperate and to recover. So we're really seeing that Dubai is becoming, such a center of excellence for that horse racing community as well. And like I said, the season starts in November, which is actually next week. Should probably be in the office, but happy to be here with you all. And then beyond that, our team does a huge amount of work traveling around the world to visit different horse racing events, and it's an industry that really, really thrives on relationships, and horse trainers and horse owners generally tend to map the trajectory of what that horse might go on to compete in year round quite far in advance. So it's making sure that we are doing what we can to infiltrate those other networks and those other horse racing events around the world to make sure that we're continuously putting Dubai onto the map. And horses, there was a very famous horse that was with us last year called Romantic Warrior. He came over from Hong Kong. He was based with us all throughout January, competing at Meydan in January. He then traveled to Saudi for the Saudi Cup in February. He then came back to us to compete on Dubai World Cup Day. And he's like a superstar in Asia. There's plushie toys of him. He's got his own Instagram page. Everyone absolutely loves this horse. And it's amazing to see how certain markets really get behind them in certain ways, whereas in other countries it's less so. They care more about the jockey or a different personality in the sport. But yeah, it's the Dubai Racing Carnival really lends itself, and there are certain days within that season that really anchor us and provide clout for our sponsors as well to be part of that whole season. But as one Dubai World Cup ends, it literally the next day it starts. We start planning for the next.
Okay. Thank you. And Sam, if I can bring this back to your expertise around, so thinking of how Sophie's point about pressure to sell tickets, a lot of that starts with knowing your audience, understanding what your data capabilities are and how you sell to those people. From your experience, what are the most compelling insights about how sport is influencing tourism patterns globally and in the Middle East using data?
I think I suppose the first thing to say is I'll come at it from a consumer data angle. There's obviously a whole other world of data out there in terms of horse data, operational data, all the other elements. From a consumer data perspective, I'm obviously going to be biased here in terms of thinking it's absolutely integral to the planning of an event, understanding your audience, who they are, what makes them tick, where you can find them, how you can turn them from single visitor to repeat visitor, all those sorts of elements. So that's kind of from the data perspective, first of all. In terms of the, how the question was around sports tourism, like globally and in the region, right, Pete? In terms of how it's growing.
Sorry.
Sorry, just repeat
Yeah.
I got a little bit lost on the data person.
The question was, from your data and research, what are the most compelling insights and how is sport influencing tourism patterns globally and in the Middle East?
Okay, fine. So I suppose I'll probably go back to what I was saying at the start, and you touched upon it as well in terms of sports tourism already being a significant piece of the pie in terms of the global landscape, but the data that we have gathered as well shows that it's only going to be growing over the coming years. So 63%, we're expecting a 63% growth in those who are planning to travel for a sports event going forward. So it's a growing, it's a growing driver in the overall global tourism ecosystem, but it's also, when you look at sports tourists and why they're so valuable, it's not only a point over sometimes they're more affluent, they're more receptive, they're kind of emotionally charged, right, when they're visiting the event, but also that point over advocacy. So our research shows that 4 in 5 have a higher impression of a destination once they've visited it from a sports event perspective. It goes even higher in terms of then recommending that place to other people, and those statistics go up towards the sort of 90%, up towards the 90% mark for those sports tourists that sit in the higher income bracket. So again, from a kind of thinking about the landscape trends and thinking about it from a destination perspective, this is like it's an area that you can't really ignore. It's a very, very attractive group that you want to be capturing, engaging, getting to experience your country, and hopefully return in the future.
Thanks, Sam. Mushtaq, if I may ask you, so with so much activity in the region, much of which we've talked about, I think it's fair to say within this region, much of the investment is government-led. How can we move on from that and attract private sector investment to coordinate with governments to sustain that momentum and growth?
Yeah, I think we touched on this, in the previous question that we've discussed, as if these governments managed to move this from a single event or episodal events kind of nature into a sustainable long-year event calendar that produces both quality events that drives visitors. The private sector will be encouraged to do that, and then of course they have to create more of an environment for the private sector, and particularly small and medium enterprises to come and play in that supply chain of these events. And governments started to realize now in the GCC, I mean, you look to what National Development Strategy of Qatar 3 for the 2030 clearly focuses on the integration of the private sector in fueling the tourism economy. And there's a lot of facilitation, exemptions, reforms happening on that front to allow for that movement to happen. In KSA, there's been a strong emphasis by the government to make sure that there is in everything that being planned or for the future, it integrates what they call the local content and the enablement of the munshaat, which is the senior small and medium enterprises. So that is how to so you move from as I said, from being a single event driven strategy into an economy and a sustainable scale of events that gives the opportunity for the private sector to play part in it, and that will then leave the ripple effects of having the right people in the private sector, train them, skill them, and also enable them to in the delivery of the support to the government.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. Good answer, Mushtaq. Okay, we have a few minutes left. There's one question I'd like to ask to the group, and please let me know who'd like to take this. If I can ask you to have a look into your crystal ball and think, if we can predict maybe 10 years into the future, which is a long time in this region, right? Maybe 5, 10 years, whatever you like. What changes can you see in immersive sport for our region? Who would like to have a go at that? Sam, go on then.
I mean, I'm not going to get a crystal ball out and try and think about what the event looks like, but I suppose it's more of a wish from my perspective in terms of how the industry would go forward, and I'd probably put it down to 2 words. One is access, so it's kind of access to the mental availability of the consumer that you're going after. You know, like we live in a world where we're being thrown all sorts of, attention economy. You know, it's very hard to really be present in a particular moment because there's so much potentially kind of taking you in a different direction. So it's thinking about how you can capture that mental availability, and then access in terms of how can you break down all of the barriers possible to make it as easy as possible for that consumer to come to your event and your country. And then the second point over collaboration is probably some of the elements that Mushtaq was talking to a little bit in terms of everyone working together rather than in silos. I think because the region is still relatively new in terms of sports and entertainment, you know, there will be a real push in a particular area, but now we're seeing the gaps being filled in and everyone working together. And if you can do that across public and private sector, all the way across the consumer journey from planning through to delivery through to return, it's a kind of 1 + 1 = 3 sort of situation. It's going to be much more powerful in positioning the region as a leader in 10 years' time. That's a cop-out. Apologies.
No, that's good answer, and let's hope you're right. Thank you very much. And we have a couple of minutes, so if anyone wishes to ask a question to my learned guests, or to me even, now is the time to do so. No, I think you've escaped. Excellent. In which case, just leaves me to say thank you, Mushtaq, thank you, Sophie, thank you, Sam, and thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.